think of medium format cameras, often my mind goes straight to a camera like the Mamiya RZ67. And you guys will know how much I really do love the RZ67 and the RB67. I've got them both, and I use them for the vast majority of my medium format work. But they're big and they're clunky and they're really difficult to carry around, especially if you're traveling. Because of this, I kind of restricted my travel photography to 35mm film, to digital photography, to iPhone photos for a really long period of time. They're easier to carry, they're more convenient, you don't have to stop and manually focus everything like you have to on the RZ and the RB. But I really was missing shooting medium format on street and travel content. And that's what leads me on really nicely to the subject of today's video, the Fuji GA645. So the Fuji GA645 is a medium format 6x4.5 point and shoot, originally released in 1995. It's a point and shoot just like you would imagine a 35mm point and shoot. It can be fully automated. So I'm talking automatic exposure, automatic focus, auto wind. Everything in this camera can be automated. Whilst it can be used as an automatic camera, you can still manually focus, you can still manually set your exposure. So it is a really great camera to get started with if you are new to medium format. So with the 6x4.5 negatives, you tend to get around 15 to 16 shots on a roll, opposed to the Mamiya RZ67, where usually when I shoot on that, I get 10 shots. And so in today's video, I wanted to show you some photos that I've been taking with the Fuji GA645 over the last 6 or 7 months or so, and talk a little bit about the things I love about this camera, the things I don't love about this camera, and some just general observations. So like I already mentioned, the camera is fully automatic if you want it to be. And this can be really useful when you're shooting travel, when you're shooting street, and you maybe don't have the time or the patience to manually meter all of your scenes, or you don't have the time to manually focus everything. And when it comes to travel, it is great because it is compact, it is light, the lens retracts back into the body when it's turned off, so it's really easy to carry about, a lot smaller and a lot lighter than something like the Mamiya RZ67 or the Pentax 67. For me, some interesting things about this camera, and some things that took a little bit getting used to, is that when the camera is held normally like this, like you would normally look through a camera, it's actually in portrait orientation instead of landscape. It's definitely something to get used to, but for me it's something I found I really enjoy because I do tend to lean towards shooting a lot of my photos in portrait orientation. When you look through the viewfinder, you'll also see that it's a little bit similar to a rangefinder in that you're using frame lines within the viewfinder to compose your image instead of composing through the lens. Because of this, you're going to want to make sure that your lens cap is removed, because when you look through the viewfinder, the view is always unobstructed regardless of whether or not you have the lens cap on. The lens doesn't always see what the viewfinder is seeing, so that can be something that takes a little bit getting used to and lead to some surprises within your compositions. One thing that is nice though is you have this raised section of the camera, so when you're shooting, you're not going to put your fingers in front of the lens. You're going to keep them, you know where to keep them. I've travelled quite a bit with this camera so far. I've taken it to Northern Ireland, I've taken it back home to London and back to Manchester with me a few times, and I also took it to New York, so you'll recognise some of the photos that I took on the Northern Ireland and the New York trip throughout this video. Whilst the autofocus function is really useful, I will say that sometimes it can be a little bit inconsistent, especially when you're trying to focus on things that are really up close. And whilst it is a lot lighter than the Mamiya RZ67 or the Pentax 67, it still is quite heavy. It's heavier than your average 35mm camera for sure. As well as the autofocus, like most cameras, the built-in light meter can be fooled. So if you are relying on the auto exposure feature, consider overexposing your film by rating the film at a lower speed. So for example, if I'm using Portra 400, I might set the ISO on the camera to 200 so that the film is overexposed by a stop. This is just my personal preference. I would rather an image be overexposed than underexposed. You can also use the exposure compensation mode on the camera, which helps you compensate either 2 stops overexposed or 2 stops underexposed. Or of course you can just set the camera to manual mode like you would with any other medium format camera, and you can just use an external light meter to meter your shots. So you probably heard how loud the camera is. I haven't found that really be an issue because I'm not using it in a scenario like a wedding or something like that, but it is loud. This lens is a fixed 60mm f4 lens. Since it's fixed, you do get a little bit less freedom with this camera in terms of your lens choice, but I do find that the 60mm is really versatile. I enjoy it for landscapes and travel content more so than I do portraits, but it is a great lens that can be used for pretty much anything. Something I have noticed about this camera is that it doesn't take too kindly to Lomography's film. You'll know if you've followed this channel for a while that I am a huge advocate for Lomography and their film stocks, particularly their colour negative range and their Metropolis. But I found that their film is a little bit harder, a little bit trickier to load into the Fuji. Occasionally the film doesn't wind really tight at the end, which means you can get some light leaks at the end. And this doesn't happen every time, so it may just be, you know, human error, it could just be a quirk of my camera, it could be the way that I am loading the film myself, but it might be something to consider if you are going to be frequently using Lomography's film like I do. Something, I will keep going back to this, but something I really enjoy about this camera is how compact it is. Everything kind of fits in, you know, the lens retracting, the flash fitting really nicely in at the top. It's a really nice camera to hold, and I just generally enjoy the look of it. I think it's a really nice looking camera. So if you're in the market for your first medium format camera, I would definitely recommend the Fuji GA645. It's very similar to using a 35mm camera, but you have the benefit of having larger negatives. And I can imagine that it would be a really good transition into all of the other things that come with learning about medium format film. You can load 120 and you can also load 220 film into the Fuji GA645. You just got to change the pressure plate. And if you're not a beginner when it comes to medium format, but you want to have a camera that is a little bit more compact, a little bit easier to travel with, then I definitely recommend the Fuji GA645. It fits in your bag really nicely, it fits in your hand really nicely, and it's not going to break your back. I found the lens to be really sharp, and some of my favourite photos that I've ever taken, I have taken with the Fuji GA645. If you're interested in seeing full videos where I've used this camera, I'm going to link a couple in the description of some of my old videos, so you can have a look at the camera in action as well as on a variety of different shoots. I'm going to roll through the last shots of this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.